knew just as like the culture of my family that like, once again, don't be a bitch, right? We fought in every American war going back to the French and Indian. Someone in my family has done it. So when it's your turn to go, you go. But I had to be a grunt. Otherwise, I couldn't come to my Thanksgiving table. That's just the way it was. If I was going to fix the things that were going on right now, I'll take the Iran war as thing it's at the top. You don't want to label the entire United States as the bad guys. The individual Americans are not the bad guys. What we're doing is extremely counterproductive, and it's getting a lot of people killed, and it's hurting U.S. credibility.
Jim, welcome to the World XP Podcast. How are you, sir?
Great, Eric. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to do a quick intro for the people, who you are and what you do and what you've been up to the past? Well, I don't know. You can go into however much detail you want. But anyways, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hey, appreciate it. Jim Webb. I am the host of the Jim Webb Podcast over on YouTube, anywhere where podcasts are found. Been doing this for, I'm making my way through month 3. Third generation Marine, was in the infantry, fought in Iraq, also been a journalist, embedded with troops in Afghanistan for a period of time. And then also worked for Senator Rand Paul on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was a senior staffer there, senior advisor to RFK Jr. during his campaign, and also worked as a defense contractor, kind of done a bunch of stuff, worked as a journalist for a while. Not really good at talking about myself. Was on Tucker Carlson in March, and that's what kind of kick-started the whole public-facing thing. Always been a guy who's pretty much been in the background and enjoyed it, but this is not too bad either. So.
Yeah, times change. You learn new things. First time for everything.
Yeah.
The question from the last guest, I think actually we'll go into a lot of what we're going to talk about, but it's how should a society go about remembering its collective past?
Ooh, honestly, that would be the absolute principal way to do it. Is you can't erase it, you can't change it. You need to embrace it because it makes you who you are, and only then can you pivot off of that into something else. I mean, I would think about it like, there's not much difference between a society's past and like your own personal past. If you make mistakes, then you need to remember them so you don't make them again.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I also think that's, at least speaking for myself, why I tend to love history so much, is especially like diving into the way that some of the guys like Dan Carlin and Daryl kind of talk about it. They really put you into the mind of the individual, and then you kind of realize how complex things actually are. Like, to plug something that you've been doing recently, the series on like the labor movement in the late 1800s or early 1900s. There's so many characters in that are either you don't learn in like regular school and you have to really go deep dive yourself into it, or it's just like you get a very top level kind of, this is what happened, and some people treated some workers bad and there were some fights, and then World War I happened, and it's kind of like a very, like, I don't know, history, the more you dive into it is, I mean, the more complex and the more honestly crazy it gets in a lot of aspects. I do want to jump in. There's a couple areas that I forgot that you did that I want to jump into, and the first is RFK's campaign. Before I forget to ask about that, going into, well, one, how did you get involved? But two, going into like, I think it was right around like 6 months or so before he dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
And they started to fiddle around with the ratings that you needed to get on the debates and like those sorts of things. Like, was the thought process in there like, no, we're actually going to win? Or was it more of like, let's get concessions and see if I can get myself into HSS and slash, or did that evolve over time? But first, how did you get involved? And then the rest of it. I'm super
Oh,
interested
wow.
to know some of that.
Holy cow. This is a very deep rabbit hole we're about to jump into.
All right,
But
let's
thanks
do
for
it.
asking.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go. So how did I get involved? So I've got a mutual friend who's like a proponent of mine, really good guy, very tight with, I guess, like the Kennedys in that area. Also, Dennis Kucinich was involved, and I'd known him kind of in like a one-off type of fashion with my work. I worked on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with Rand Paul, and then I worked on a Senate campaign, and then I was working at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Basically, the kind of like my bread and butter was, I would say, anti-war issues, but not just like anti-war, just like the realistic application of force and curbing our drift towards empire. Big things for Kucinich. A friend of mine floated my name, and I was, kind of happy as a clam working at a think tank in DC. Those are cushy jobs, and was a little bit burned out on the political side of things. But he told me the day before I was going to go on vacation, actually to where I currently live. You can see where this goes. But that RFK was going to call me, and I was like, dude, get out of here. Like, he's not going to. He wants. This is not how this works. And then about, an hour later, RFK calls me and says, hey, do you want to come? We talked, like we saw eye to eye on issues of foreign policy at the time. Mind you, this is was it August of 23? Everything blends together. It was the August before the election, right?
Yeah, so 23.
Yeah, so a year and change before the actual election happened. And so eye to eye, he's like, hey, I'd like to be a senior advisor. Here's all of the title, we'll give you all this different everything. And I was like, you know what? Write me up an offer. That sounds great. I went on vacation. 2 days later, I'm down floating off the coast of the Panhandle of Florida with my cell phone in my pocket, catching snapper left and right, having an absolute ball. And had seen the area, loved it, and the offer came in, and I was like, holy cow, this is completely remote. I don't have to like move to a campaign headquarters. I could move my family to the Pensacola area and fish every day, and work, supporting a guy who is highlighting the major issues of the day that I thought were very important. And I thought there was a very big window for a third candidate in that election cycle, because you had the return of Trump. You had, we're coming off the basically the Joe Biden hangover, and people were completely disaffected, particularly in the middle. And, just COVID had ripped everything apart. And I thought this guy could run as a moderate Democrat and win. And like, I'm a pretty conservative guy with very libertarian leaning tendencies in a lot of areas, but I classify myself as a kind of an originalist when it comes to the Constitution. If you're going to peg me politically, that's where I would be. And I do not care about political party for the most part. Like, I care about the individual running, and thought that he had a really good shot. Of course, I had been on the job less than 2 months when he decided to run independent, and I thought that was a horrible mistake. I was his rep at the DNC meeting in DC when they were going through. It was kind of an appeals process of sorts, to make sure that he had adequate representation inside the Democrat Party. And
Can you expand on that a little bit before you keep going, for people
sure.
that are not familiar with like what was actually happening? Because I also don't remember, but I remember he made the switch from trying to primary and then went independent.
Yeah, so the best starting point with this is you got to look at the Democrat Party. It is a machine. Both parties are complete machines, but this was right after the election cycle where they cooked the entire process to put Joe Biden on the ballot. And they were trying like hell to launch a whole bunch of lawfare against RFK, to ensure his name just couldn't appear on the ballot. They're playing every kind of tricky game in the book to jam up the process. And when you're a secondary candidate, you don't have a ton of money. And if you're in court the entire time trying to argue if you can even have your name on the ballots for people to cast votes to you, you're going to burn through your war chest, which is what we were looking at. Just trying to ensure that people could see your name, let alone, the like hiring staff, putting ads out, really doing the things that would push a platform forward to get people to vote to you. So they take you off the board in a big way. I still thought there was a lot of room because, obviously Kamala Harris is like the least inspiring person I think I've ever seen in politics.
The Michael Malice clip on Rogan sums that up quite nicely. If you know the one that I'm talking about, that I will not say that out loud here currently, but if you're interested, you should go look that up. Anyways, sorry, keep going.
Oh, you're good, man. And so the the campaign went independent like probably I guess it was like October. It was October 8th. Because I remember like my the first big red flag I had with the campaign, outside of like I'd worked on a couple, I'd worked in politics, I'd worked on the Hill, I ran field ops for a Senate campaign where the guy won. basically a year prior to that, and like I know what a winning operation looks like. I mean, it's no different than a well-run like rifle platoon in the Marine Corps. Like, I mean, just the the similarities are overwhelming. And they did not have it, and it was kind of a it's like okay, it's in its infancy, maybe we'll flush this stuff out. But then once we went independent, is when I had a red flag combined with his statements on providing Israel with a blank check into Gaza, because you can take the issue set over here. There's all we can dive into that, but I was looking at something more along the lines of congruency. Like were his positions congruent? And he had made all of his, and the big thing he talked to me about was Ukraine. And he had made so much hay in the foreign policy space on being opposed to the Ukraine war and giving them a blank check. And he wanted diplomacy to take over and this, that, and the other thing. And you wake up August or October 8th, and it was the exact opposite. So that was red flag number two. Like, was he undermined his own position, and he had moved outside of a party apparatus where he could actually win. And unless you have a major financier backing you as an independent, I don't care if you're running for dog catcher, you're not going to win. It's just the reality of the political landscape here in the United States. So it was troubling. Now the second part of your question, the positioning aspect, I think from there on out, I mean, this is like I didn't hear it from anybody's lips, but you could see the way the campaign was run that they were not particularly serious about winning. From that point out, I tried a number of things from the inside to kind of highlight him and collect voters on the fringes of other operations, like when DeSantis, for example, became it was kind of clear he had a decent base in the Republican Party, but he was never going to win the nomination.
Yeah.
And they had an overlap in issue sets, one like which was COVID, the COVID response. They're kind of in the same boat on that. And I tried to get them on stage together, got the DeSantis people to buy in. I was living in Florida. They were all about it. They were going to have a nice chat. But inside the RFK campaign, they thought that anybody who would vote for DeSantis was an extremist. It's just like, okay, bro.
See, that's interesting to me because, well, one, to your point of when he was talking about giving Israel a blank check, I remember that very distinctly because just as somebody who pays attention and not even saying who or what I was supporting, but just as an analyst or analyzing the situation, it's like, well, that was a dumb thing to say, even if you actually believe that, because up until that point, you had gotten pretty much all the anti-war people for the most part on side.
Yep.
And or at least given them enough to think about where it's a significant enough chunk of voters that like all of a sudden people are going to have to be concerned with what you're doing. And then when he said that, I was like, well, that was dumb. To your point about about them thinking all the DeSantis people are extremists, that also, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more on that because that to me kind of strikes me as interesting because you have one group of people, right? You mentioned the overlapping kind of COVID response sort of or issue sets there of what they're looking at. And then that's interesting because that was his biggest thing for a lot of it was the COVID response, the vaccines, and like generally speaking, the dyes and all the other chemicals and those sorts of things. And so you would have thought that people that agreed with that would have also agreed with the DeSantis people, especially if they weren't supporting Trump, who had been still and still is painted as all the ists in the book.
Yep.
And so that to me strikes me as a bit, what is the rationale or like what, like how did, I don't even, that there was one thing that I was not expecting to hear today, and that was it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah. So rationale. I don't think any logic was applied to it. Now this
no,
gets
all right, well,
into
fair enough.
yeah, this gets into the like so my perspective, very logical, was exactly what you're talking about. And you couple that with you have DeSantis who's going to be leaving the race, and my knowledge of your DeSantis supporters being out and about was that they were effectively a never Trump type of base.
Yeah.
And but they shared some of the same tenets. Generally anti-war, anti-intervention, generally not whole, but the number one issue for people supporting him was probably COVID response and the health of the state, if you will. So the vehicle was to put them on stage together and then to give all the people who might support DeSantis an off ramp to a different candidate. Take them away from begrudgingly pulling the lever for Donald Trump. And the way it was received was a complete representation of actually what the campaign was, and it became clear over time. This was basically a bunch of like Orange County, California, um, just people with tons of money from out there. Like they're very left wing Californians who had decided to go on safari and run for president. And it was just completely detached from reality and from the actual machinations of the process. And for them to tell me that your DeSantis voter was was an extremist, we didn't want to get Bobby up there with him. It actually spoke to me a little bit because I was like, well, actually, I voted for Trump last time. Like, what do you guys think? Like, you guys don't know that. Like, what would you think about me if you knew that? Like, holy cow!
Yeah.
You think DeSantis is like milk toast Republican, man? Um, and I'm a pretty hardcore populist. I mean, you've listened to some of my stuff,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but not an extremist by any stretch, but just like I want big time change in this country, and my people are the people that who are employing me would call like just like crazy rednecks, hillbillies, the rest of it. So there was a big detachment, and they were detached from reality, and it showed up at the end. And there's no doubt by the end of the campaign, I left in early January of 24 because I'd been on the road constantly for years, had a new daughter born, and then uh, Kennedy went on Breaking Points and said that the operations in Iraq by the guys on the ground were nothing short of collective punishment, and that actually the IDF operating in Gaza was more moral and was using better tactics than we used in Iraq, and that that really irritated the crap out of me, to put it mildly. And I called him, was like, "Listen, you need to take that back." I was his veterans director, and also senior advisor on foreign policy. Is like, this is just flat wrong, and you're insulting the people that we're trying to recruit. I can't do my job. And he said he would not. So I said goodbye. And I just had enough. Like, and it wasn't going anywhere, right? And at that point, it's pretty clear that the people who were senior, who were hanging on, there was a lot of bleed off on staff before that point. That they were angling for a position probably inside the next administration, and that a lot of the folks on the periphery had found like a really cool new way to make money. There's a number of PACs that came off that campaign that are still out there
Hmm.
being run by campaign people. Nothing against them. I mean, everybody's got to make a buck, right? But some of us who were really out there trying to move the needle in terms of ideology and like you know, I don't know, true believers in like America and shifting, trying to steer this aircraft carrier a different direction. It was pretty hard to swallow that pill, but you know.
So what's it like being in a situation where like RFK has got obviously the family history and he's got some of the cult, like it was still cool to see him with jeans and without a shirt on doing bench press and pull-ups or whatever, and like there was still like parts of it where you're like, okay, like I kind of am rooting for the guy. I think
Mhm.
people generally or people that had voted for Trump were generally happy with the pick as Health and
Mhm.
Human Services Secretary. That is what it is. I think it is.
Yeah.
Um, but like, so for you to call the guy and be like, "Hey, bro, like this is not working." Um, that's got to take. Were you nervous making that call? Because I can imagine somebody with that kind of ilk and stature, and you're going to tell them to basically kick rocks is like that's not maybe not the most fun thing that anyone is looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was nervous about it. I mean, so as an individual, he's very approachable.
Sure.
Um, Very approachable. I even did that. He brought me back on his podcast a few months later to talk Ukraine. No hard feelings really. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm a, I don't know, pretty stubborn guy. I get to a point where I don't care. Like, you push me to a point, like, and it's just, I will never put what I believe behind, anything else. Like once you hit that point, right? Like in that, like, I was not gonna work for a guy who threw me and my peers under the bus as war criminals and like tried to make it something positive, and it just was not going to happen.
No.
So I'm gonna. I told him exactly how I felt, and I do that across the board. I will, having worked in politics, like I don't operate like a live wire or anything like that. Like there's a lot you have to like kind of smooth over, in order to function in that environment. It's because at the end of the day, it's always like policy decisions, right? It's always what your boss wants because he's the guy who's out. It's his vision. It's his seat. Like Rand Paul or RFK on Gaza in particular. Like if he's convinced he want to take the position that we needed to have a blank check for the Israelis, then okay, like that's your position, bro. Like I will support where I can, but if you put like what I feel most passionately about, which is my service, out there as an object to be debated or denigrated, like you're going to hear from me and I'm going to say no. So there was no hesitation whatsoever.
Yeah.
The nerves were like my wife having given birth and I'm about to quit my job. So
Yeah, yeah. I could, yeah. No, that makes sense. That was more out of curiosity, just because once you start to deal with people of a certain kind of stature, I've said this on the show before, like once you get up to like that certain level of stature where they've had a level of success, there's a, they're kind of wired a little bit differently. And so
right.
sometimes you have to like do that in a way that makes sense, we'll say.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't want to burn the bridge totally,
no,
but
of course not. Of course
at the
not.
same time, one of the pitfalls I've seen time and time again inside the political arena is when people put the connection in front of what they believe. Like, so, you get hired in DC as a staffer and you're rubbing shoulders with like Senator X, President Y, whomever it is. People will decide that they have to maintain that relationship in front of anything else because it's inherent to their success. And
Yeah.
then you lose the bubble and you become, like a lizard person basically. Like you
Yeah.
lose soul in the process.
Well, that's what I was about to get to, because also by a lot of those people need somebody around them who will tell them no,
Yeah.
but
Oh
they'll
yeah.
do it in a way that's like diplomatic, maybe we'll
Mhm.
say. Um, and so you being that in that position seems, and kind of where I was going with that was twofold. One, which is like, did you have conversations about his RFK's Gaza position? And then also two, kind of the distinctions between working with RFK and then with Rand Paul in terms of Rand Paul's got, obviously he's the son of Ron Paul, and that's comes with its own sort of baggage, not necessarily negative baggage, but baggage.
Mhm.
But for RFK, like if you're his foreign policy guy and his veterans guy, like do you have a conversation with him before he said by, and I'm guessing by the way that you told the story, the answer is probably no, that you didn't have a conversation with him before he said it. But like afterwards, you're like, hey dude, this is like this is what's going on. And the other thing that struck me as odd about that as well was he was on Dave Smith's show a bunch of times at
Mhm.
that point. And
Yeah.
Dave, regardless of if you agree or disagree with him, is a very good communicator and he knows his stuff.
Mhm.
And so to me, for him to like, it was such an own goal. Like I remember seeing that and being like, why did you do that? So I
Yeah.
don't know what was the situation? I mean, not, and we don't have to harp on it too much before we move
Yeah.
on to other things. But like I'm really curious about it because it would just like I was so like stunned. It was like this seems like such an own, like why?
Yeah. So one of the problems with the RFK campaign was that there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen to make it sound lame. But I was brought in, and then you had any number of people who glommed onto him, and then it became a competition for access, right? And
No, of
we
course.
had
Well,
a yeah, and then and so we weren't like in a single space. We weren't all going to the same events. The campaign was dispersed from California up into Massachusetts. There was no real headquarters. There was a headquarters for tax purposes, put it that way. But so that was kind of a problem if you wanted to really concentrate brain power. We did have a very, very detailed discussion about Gaza, about how to handle this. And what was immediately apparent was that those of us who advocated for, kind of threading the needle, walking this back, and making it palatable to his supporters based on the anti-war stance, but also like, you know, trying to find that traditional avenue by which he could still support the Israeli government. It's like you have the traditional Israel can defend itself versus like, hey, we got to be careful that we don't support potentially, an endless war in this region, which is exactly what happened. But we had a great strategy, and then this is one thing that like I will never quite understand. I'm pretty sure I know what happened, but we had a script laid out. We were going to make a video because he was really big on social media communication, and then talking points. And this was like the people at the very top. The new campaign manager after Dennis Kucinich, which was Amaryllis. And the loss of, by the way, I gotta say, the loss of Kucinich as his campaign manager was the biggest blow.
Mm,
The single biggest blow to that campaign. And then there was a bunch of consternation about the position from people on the data side, on the field side, who were hardcore libertarian types. They ended up being dismissed or quitting or forced out, however you want to put it.
sure. They
And it
were
became,
gone.
yeah, they were gone, like just randomly doing a great job, great track record, and all of a sudden they and their people are gone. But another own goal, if you will. And it became clear that like there were influences inside that campaign that weren't going to allow him to have a particular position, and those influences are still there to this day.
Hmm.
They're right
All right.
alongside him in government.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I
So
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Fair enough.
yeah. This individual particular, I'm not gonna mention his name, but he was right there next to Kennedy on every call and is still next to him at HHS, which is very strange. So
Fun.
yeah.
Um, okay, so Rand Paul,
Mhm.
and I want to ask about the campaign with that, and I don't want to spend too much more time on campaigns because there's loads of other
Yeah.
stuff that I want to ask you about, and I want to ask you about the Rand Paul stuff in contrast with Massey because they're both Rand Paul's
Mhm.
Kentucky as well, right?
Yeah.
So in that state, it feels like Rand Paul, Ron Paul, Massey. I think there's one other one that's kind of that like libertarian. Like it seems to be that sort of that state seems to have proportionally or disproportionately more kind of affinity for that sort of
Mhm.
political leaning, let's say. So when you're in the Rand Paul campaign, and also, well, I guess just what's because you mentioned earlier, you've been a part of a winning campaign. So I want to ask
Yeah.
you about like what
So-
that actually means, but then also
Mhm.
then your thoughts on Massey as well from like the campaign perspective.
Yeah. So just as a point of technical clarification, I worked field ops for Eric Schmidt out of Missouri. And I was
Oh,
in
okay.
I worked on the Hill for Rand. And
Okay, my fault.
yeah, and I did. I mean, I like they would use some of our stuff on the campaign trail, but it was never really a thing while I was there. But so Rand in terms of being a boss was completely different. Because we had like a weekly rhythm with the hearings and everything, and he was a guy you could basically just walk into his office and talk to him. And one thing I loved about working with him is that I was his defense, intel, foreign policy guy. I consider myself really good on that issue set, but anytime I went to go talk to that man about what was going on and what we might do in terms of legislation or committee actions and the rest of it, like I had better have this totally thought out and like be there with my A game because he was reading the same stuff I was reading and is a highly intelligent person. And it was a very much like a steel sharpened steel type of environment.
Mm,
Um, but he is Rand is not a libertarian in the sense that his dad was or Massey was, or is to this day. He is a constitutionalist. I think he's very much an originalist. But also when you're in the Senate, you got to play a completely different game because there's fewer of you up there. And the one thing you don't want to have happen is to be totally sidelined and marginalized. So there's a lot of things that a senator has to do that don't make sense on the surface to your average person. And I'll go back to the motion to proceed on the National Defense Authorization Act last week, where the section in there 219 is raising like all kinds of questions. I'm not a fan of it. But people inferred him voting for the motion to proceed to the bill as supporting that section. That's a 1,000-page bill, and all that motion to proceed was the action to bring this bill to the floor so you then could amend it. In a perfect world, that section would be struck out before it got there.
can you
Not gonna happen.
describe real quickly for what 219 is for people listening that might not know?
Yeah, so in summary, 219 would effectively fuse the Israeli and the American defense industrial base. That's the best way to put it. It would allow them to bring companies over here, manufacture under the Made in America provision. It would enable all kinds of data sharing on any program we're on, different components. Like one major red flag that I would think comes out of that, having worked in this environment a little bit, is that all of a sudden you have them manufacturing, say, routers and switches, and that's stamped made in America, and it's actually made by a foreign government, and then that piece of equipment ends up at NSA and say the backbone of the architecture. Like that should be a massive red flag to everybody. Like I don't care if it's,
Yep.
yeah, no foreign country should be doing that, period. But it's across the spectrum. Um, and it in large part is supposed to replace the aid we give them by allowing us just to give them government contracts, our tax dollars to support their military. It's a mess, and it needs to be gone. And so people are freaking out about this justifiably, and it's still in the NDA. They haven't struck it out, but the process of bringing it to the floor doesn't impact that, in my opinion. I haven't worked up there one way or the other. And the Democrats, like if you look at this from a political standpoint, the Democrats blocked the motion to proceed. They all voted against it. You need 60 votes. They were just like, absolutely not. And it had absolutely nothing to do with 219. They got up there and, started talking about war powers in Iran, for like the first time. So, yeah.
Can
And
I
so,
can I interrupt very
yeah,
quickly?
yeah, absolutely.
When you're working in the Senate, and I have this thought come across my brain like once every month or something,
Oh
which
boy.
is once in a while I would just love if I could just be transported into the Senate and just be like, what are you guys doing? And just like I don't get it. I don't know if you have thoughts or you have things that you want to say to that, but there's so many things like that where you're like, oh, Democrats didn't want to do this, Republicans didn't want to do that. And it's
Yeah.
like, I get it. There's politics that needs to be played, but did all of you forget why you were elected in the first place? And it does my head in, and I cannot. Anyways, I will get on the soapbox that I do not need to be on. But like like when you're like you're right there. Did you have like how did I don't even know what I'm asking. I guess how did you not do that? Is maybe the question.
Yeah, so I was there a lot. And I mean, it depends on how many hours you have today to dive into this. But
Dude, just go. The only thing that I was gonna do is mow my lawn, and I don't need to do that. So
okay.
that was
But
it's all good.
so two points. Both of these are not particularly serious, but also are very serious. Like one, I took a daily walk. My good colleague Erica King will remember this if she's listening. To get a payday, I would go find a payday bar every single day because I would just eventually have to stand up from my desk and just be like, "This is freaking insane," and go clear my head. And I'd walk around. I'd buy a payday. I would come back to my desk. The other part of it is that realistically, the best way to describe working on Capitol Hill is that it is high school with paychecks, just straight up high school with paychecks. And like, no matter like the social component of that, and I was never in the cool kids club while I was up there. I was older, probably cynical, salty, and also I lived in Baltimore and commuted every day down there. And
Damn.
I love, yeah, I love I made the mistake of buying a house in Baltimore, completely different situation, but like I enjoyed my anonymity up there. At the same time, nobody knew what I did. And nobody would talk to me about that kind of crap. But inside the DC bubble, like no matter how much these folks disagree, they all go to the same brunch clubs, they all go to the same parties, they all want to be friends, they don't want to rock the boat. And the big problem where this comes into is the staffers, because the staffers read the bills, they write the bills, they make the decisions, they will literally write a congressman or a senator a one page about what they're supposed to do on every single bill because their bosses in large part don't read anything. Um, and so you get a lot of a self-licking ice cream cone just going on, where It's just like, what's the easiest way out in order for me to preserve my social status? Because that's a big pressure. But more importantly, almost everybody on both sides of the aisle comes from a particular like staffer factory, if you will. They all have the same arc. They go to the same grad schools. They have the same professors. They have the same internships. They come through the same offices, and they just circulate around. It's it's kind of like the NFL where you have like the coaches club, except way worse. No matter
Yeah,
how
except
like
the NFL Coaches Club is not bombing countries. So,
exactly. Like exactly. Yeah. So it's and I used to and I don't say there's any bitterness because I'm happy not to be there. Because there's so much more to life than working 16-hour days to get nothing done. Is that I would go to like my foreign relations meetings and walk in there and be the only guy in the room with any kind of combat experience at all. And like I at that point, I had covered war as a journalist. I had been to war. I had worked in the defense industry. I had worked in the intelligence community as a contractor, and like had a breadth of experience that informed my decision making. And like I've never like I didn't start off as like an anti-war guy when I was like 10 years old. I wanted to grab a rifle and go fight for my country. All the way through it. I just the decisions and seeing that we weren't getting anywhere really changed my mind along the way. But I would argue against sanctions bills, or tell them that like, hey, if you guys aren't going to pull people out of Syria or whatever it was, like I was going against the grain, and I was in my mid 30s with a lifetime of experience, like getting sneered at by some 25-year-old recently graduated grad student, um, you know, who would be like, well, you didn't go to the right college, so you don't know what you're talking about. But that's the mentality. It's like
oh,
they,
that would do my head in too.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was entertaining, to put it like, at its core, and in the most positive way possible. But that's the attitude you get, is that like it's not there. There's an absolute absence of any kind of real world experience that are informing people to make these decisions. But it's all coming out of this like, I mean, like I'm trying to like police my language here for you. So
Well, it's
I'm
let me kind of switch it up slightly. I guess what I was getting at when I said I wanted to go just like be teleported in there and like
yeah,
are they aware that people are not happy with them? Like
no,
I guess that's really more of what I'm getting at is like they just have no clue. Like they're just so insulated that
yeah,
like so what
yeah.
happens if somebody goes, "Hey, we don't like what you guys are doing." And then they're like, "Well, that's fine because all of us think the same way, so therefore like what I just the
That's
lack the
I wish
lack
I
of
had a
self.
better yeah, it's just I wish I had a better way to describe it, but like there's two instances where I was up there, where there was a large amount of dissent, like from the public raining down on the place. The first was when like I wasn't even working up there. I was still on active duty and my dad was in the Senate, and
Hmm.
I went up there one afternoon and hung out with him. Um, because I would do that. I was PCS up to the DC area, and like if I had a break, I'd go see my dad, like in my
Yeah.
20s. Like, and he had a hearing or something. I was really tired, so I took a nap on the couch, and then all of a sudden in his office, and all of a sudden I heard the staffers banging around about like these like unruly people. And I walk out to the front office, and there is like grown ass people, like I'm talking like 40 and 50-year-olds screaming at interns, about Obamacare. Um, and it's just like it blew my mind. And I pulled him out and I talked to him. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, first of all, like, you guys can't see this. You can't see the senator. Like, it's just not how this works. Like, he has a schedule. He's like, he has a schedule. Like, he has no free time. Like, no, he has no freedom. Well, so and so told me. It's like, so and so like from the radio told you could come in here. Okay. But like back them off. But then you go and you talk to the other people and they don't get it. Like their job, they're it's also just like any other job where you're so focused on like what you have to do in the immediate term that you don't see it. But then you live in the environment of DC, like the greater area. It's like it's completely gilded for the most part. Like there's no real worries. There is some crime in the DC area, but like not like there used to be. You go work in a marble building, you go to your happy hours afterwards and see the same people. You go back to your luxury apartment and you live like with 500 other staffers. You go to the baseball games with the staffers. You go back to work, and it's just this. It's you have this tiny little world, and they never really get outside the beltway except to be conned into like picking fruit for some farmer out in like rural Virginia, like Fauquier County or something. Like be in their labor for the day or something. but
Oh,
but yeah, it's totally insular though.
okay. I don't know what I was hoping the answer to that question would be. If it was yes, they're totally just not self-aware, or they are aware and they don't care. I don't really know which one is worse.
Probably a
Um,
mix.
yeah. All right. Well, let's get off this subject before both of
Yeah.
us get annoyed. Um, so one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was
Mhm.
since you've gone podcast full time, what's that
Yeah.
transition been like for you? So you were working defense industrial base, and then the Tucker appearance happens.
Yeah.
F Also, just out of my own curiosity, is he how he is on screen? Is that the same person?
Same guy. Same guy. Very genuine.
Though there's sometimes when he asks questions that I'm like, I know you know the answer to that already.
Well, it's a
But
good journalist.
yeah, no, 100%. Anyways, okay, so the Tucker appearance happens, and then all of a sudden you're doing like what's the adjustment like for you with that? So got the kids, got the family, etc. I've been doing this for 6 years. I haven't really tried to make it a thing other than like I like talking to people. But so I know from experience also finding ways to monetize these things without the big numbers and the rest of it can be a little bit tricky occasionally, right? You might pick up the small sponsorship thing where somebody pays you to read out their thing for a couple episodes. But so it's not easy. So like what was that adjustment for you like? What sorts of things did you learn along the way, or are you still learning? And how's that been for you just as a whole? And also you mentioned, I think, I don't remember if we were recording it or not, but you're usually behind the scenes guy. So that transition into now in front of the camera, how's that been?
It's been interesting. I mean, it's been interesting, and I mean, like, I think we're probably similar in a lot in the sense that like I like having conversations. I like talking with people. But if you find me off the clock, I'm typically pretty dead quiet. Generally fairly introverted, but I'd much rather have my own time and space. But it's been so the last like the last job I had was very hardcore corporate America. I was working in the defense industry on the big old corporate side, briefing the CEO and all this stuff of a $20 billion a year organization. And that also kept me on the road for about 6, 7 months out of the year. And I got a young family, and that was an incredible strain. Also, quite flatly, totally unfulfilling. It was a means to an end. Bad for your health to be traveling that much. Bad for your relationships, like not just your marriage, but like your friendships, because you never see anybody. Um, so the actual transition into podcasting itself was, I mean, I won't say it was easy, but like I'm home. I get to set my own rhythm, and do the things I need to do at my own pace. Well, not really my own pace, at a not on the road traveling through freaking Hartsfield 2 or 3 times a week type of pace. Um, but the actual like so I got very lucky. I consider I was very blessed. I had a producer come and ask me if I wanted to do a show, and I got to feel it out. And this guy's backed me, and he is awesome. Chris Leonard, you're amazing. Thank you. But he he takes care of like a lot of the details, right? But the actual practice of having to talk for an hour every day live is really rough. Because it's you can't come off bored, you can't come off unprepared. You got to stay current, but also be a little bit different. And then just the prep to get somebody to talk for an hour is can be a lot. So it's different. I like it better because I get to do stuff like this in the afternoon. Once again, you set your own schedule. I get to like make my kids breakfast in the morning every single day, and I love that. So it's been good. But what am I learning about it? I mean, it's a grind, but I can't differentiate that in my head from any other grind, right? And it's like traveling for work, total grind,
Yeah.
total absolute. But at least I'm doing this on my end to try and like it's like you're building a company that at the end of the day, like, I'm gonna get out of it what I put into it. And I've never had the mindset that I want to fail. So it's
Yeah.
uh it's
Well,
probably driving my
it's a grind where you get to make your kids breakfast though. So that's the thing
yeah.
where it's like that's got to be so rewarding. You also see the other thing with like YouTube and things like that is like you see the numbers start to grow. It's like if you start your
Right.
weightlifting journey or something for the first time
Mhm.
and your squat goes bigger and whatever. Like there's things like that that are super helpful. Also, one of the things that I love about it is like the trial and error. It's like, okay, these thumbnails don't work. Like I don't have a producer, it's just me, but sometimes I
Yeah.
use ChatGPT to help me out with things like that. But it's like similar enough. ChatGPT calls itself my producer, which I found funny. It came up with that by itself, and I was like, I don't know if I should be concerned by this or not.
Probably.
But no, I mean, and then the other thing that I joke is like I've got to give myself a free undergrad education over doing like talking to so many cool people and
That's the
do all
best part.
sorts of things. How have you been with like, were you interviewing people when you were a journalist before?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that part is not new to you then.
No, no, and that's actually, I mean, my problem when I was interviewing people when I was a like a print journalist, I did a couple of video interviews, but the print side was like I would need a quote, and next thing I know, I'd be wrapping up an hour-long conversation with somebody about something because it's like it so the transition was natural, right? And like you said, the coolest thing apart about doing a podcast is like I get to sit here and ask cool people questions all day long. It's literally my job is to get a subject matter expert on something or somebody notable out there uh, to talk and learn. And it's just it's phenomenal. It's like I'm a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. I mean, you've had some, I mean, obviously given your career, maybe not obviously to me anyways, given your career, some of the people that you've had on to like start the show have been like top. Like that was one of the things why when I was about to message you, I was like, who is this guy and how did he get all these people right off the jump? It's taken me 6 years to get somebody like that. Um, but like to have that kind of caliber of individual also, I think helps like some of the names that you've had on. I mean, I don't know. There's something about where like the first time I had somebody like super big on the show, and I didn't come from a career the same as you did. Like I wasn't around senators or whoever or whatever. The first time I was, they had popped on the screen and they started talking, and I was like, oh, this is just a person. And I had to like keep reminding myself that over and over and over again. And then eventually you get used to it. Um, but yeah, no, that I mean, podcasting is. You got to like develop the talent, but I think I don't know. I used to think like everybody should do it, but now everybody's doing it, so everybody
Yeah.
shouldn't do it anymore. But I'm glad that I started one for sure. Um, let's see, what else did I want to ask you about? Oh yes, Iraq, and combat stuff in Afghanistan. When about were you there over deployed, whether as a contractor or active duty?
So I went to Afghanistan in 2004 as a journalist. Um,
Okay.
that was my first taste, if you will. And then I went to Iraq in 2006 as a Marine, and that was not a lot of fun.
Were you in
It was
Fallujah?
no Ramadi. I was in
Oh,
Ramadi.
wow. Not much better.
Yeah, it was right after they had pushed all the insurgents into Ramadi from Fallujah.
Oh,
And
how nice of them for you.
exactly. I mean, hey, at least I mean I can go to my grave saying I didn't get cheated on a deployment, I guess. But yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But no, it was eye-opening. I mean, so we were there, we were in downtown Ramadi and from
Let's do Afghanistan
um,
first. Let's
sure.
go kind of a bit chronologically. So
Yeah.
when you went to how did you end up as a journalist and then end up taking a gig that takes you to Afghanistan sort of at the height of or height-ish
Yeah.
of that conflict?
Completely randomly.
Oh,
So it
good.
was, yeah, I was in college and I was taking summer classes and like had my weekly check-in call with my dad. Journal he's done a lot of journalism. He got an Emmy Award for Beirut back in the 80s. And he's telling me like, hey, I'm gonna get to go to Afghanistan. They wanted me to go to Iraq, and I said like you wouldn't want to print the story I read about Iraq. But so they got me to go to Afghanistan, and um, I'm sitting there. I was in ROTC and had probably 2 beers on a Friday night, getting ready to go out, and had my gumption up a bit, and said, "Well, tell them you can't go unless I get to go." And I thought I made like a pretty good wisecrack. He said, hold on a second. And I was like, okay. Hangs up. 10 minutes later, calls me back. He's like, all right, they agreed. Like, you can go. And all I'm going to do is like hump gear. But his photographer was supposed to be Eddie Adams. And I'd done some writing, but I wasn't like a serious journalist or anything like that. Eddie Adams is this guy who took one of the most famous pictures in Vietnam of the Viet Cong guy being executed, like at the second he pulled the trigger. And Adams was actually terminally ill at the time, so he didn't make the trip. And we went to a bunch of like really remote places, and I ended up as the guy with the camera. And my dad was pushing 60 at that point. So it's let me get that math right. Yes, he was pushing. He was 58, I believe. Yes. So he and with wounded twice in Vietnam, so he didn't like have a tremendous amount of mobility. But we went out to Helmand, Ruzgan, I believe northern Kandahar, and then up the Konai River Valley, around the Pakistani border. And my job was literally just to like drop in with the different Marine units and patrol with them, take their picture, talk to them. I exchanged a lot of information for cigarettes, and just kind of try to catalog the trip. I took several hundred pictures along the way. Um, and it was absolutely incredible. Blew my mind. The biggest piece about it was I ended up initially embedding with Weapons Company, 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, who I would join as a rifleman about 18 months later. And they still remembered me very much and then blamed their extension upon me. But it was rather fun for a while in Weapons Company 1-6. But no, just like I got out there and realized like that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be out there. It was I'd always felt guilty being in college. Like I was in college when 9/11 happened, as initially a baseball player, and then joined the boxing team at Penn State. Just trying to find a way to fill the void and like, just do the thing. My dad wanted me to stay in school. But got out there and ran around for about a month and was just like, oh my gosh, this is, you're on the frontier seeing stuff that nobody gets to see, really in the middle of a story, but also like with like-minded people, who I then, you know, came upon, in the Marine Corps itself. Um, but it was fascinating. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Took a whole rack of pictures, ended up with a cover shot on Parade magazine and like 8 or 9 printed on the inside. And some of them are good pictures. Some of them were just because like, wow, we haven't seen a picture of like mountaintop in Eastern Afghanistan. Like, so I guess this gets to go in regardless of like how well I did it by the textbook or not.
Nah, it's
But
in there. It still counts.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, has
never gonna
to.
count that. So,
So, okay, so you come home.
hmm.
Was there anything particularly crazy about that one, or just the first experience of being out there, or
Not
anything else you
really.
want to touch on before we go to the other one?
No, I mean there were no like grand firefights or real massive like events. Some mortars, a guy got medevaced. A couple of raids, like just nothing too. It was a different war at that point. It's everybody was super mobile. The Pakistani border area, I could not wait to leave. Let's put it that way. It turned my stomach. Because there was this little platoon size OP right on a river, right on the Konar River, with a special forces team attached to it. And at night, you could see the lights like of the insurgents were up in the mountains, flashing lights back and forth, basically doing rehearsals, like coordinating fires. Like, we're over here, and they're queuing. One patrol in particular we went, I think it was like a 6 or 7 mile patrol that went linearly 1.5 kilometers, but it was just like everything was straight up this mountain and straight back down. And we were being shadowed the entire time from above. Um, like they were watching us, and the Afghan SF guys who were attached to us were kind of freaking out. Like I remember at one point they were like we took a patrol break and we were all trying to hide in some shade. And there's a squad size patrol with a team or a squad of Afghan SF attached to it. And these guys, one guy in particular, had like a red shirt on, and he's like dancing out in the open, like doing this thing out in the open. And like ironically, the I think one of the team leaders was a guy I went to high school with, and name was Jose Ramirez. Great dude. Actually, my sister's boyfriend at the time. And this part of the story that's being written too. And I turned to him like, what on earth is this dude doing? He's like, oh, he's just crazy. He's just crazy. And I'm like, okay, I'll take your word for it. Like, this is not, I'm not out here like running anything. Then I've been here for 5 freaking minutes. And then we crest the next hill, and there's like 3 or 4 squirters who are armed, who are like running up over the ridge, and looked like he was tipping them off that they were coming, for better or worse. And in that case, it was for better, to avoid an ambush. But that was the hairiest thing that happened. It wasn't a big deal. But it's one of those things that kind of sticks with you. You leave, and you're like, man, those guys are still there. Holy cow. And
So what's that like for you, being like you'd never been over there, been in combat or anything of like that before, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, you're gonna follow these guys on patrol. By the way, you might get shot at. Like, and you never really know. I feel like you never really know how you'll react until you're in it.
oh, exactly.
Especially, I mean, you go through boot camp and other things, like it prepares you differently. But for you
Right.
as a civilian at that point, like, what is going through your head?
What did I get myself into? That was the big thing, but also don't be a bitch. Like that was the other part of it. Like I had my dad on one side, like sending his son out on a patrol. And by the way, the Marines there armed me. Um, it was against the Geneva Convention, but like
Yeah.
they gave me a guy's rifle and a bunch of ammo who was not coming on the patrol. Because their perspective was, listen, like if we get hit, they're not going to care that you're a journalist. I was like, fair point. And like I could shoot. Like I grew up in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about anything when it came to combat. I thought I did, but I did not. I'd learn that later. But no, it's like I remember leaving the wire there in particular. The rest of it, like flying to different places, being in vehicle movements, some foot movements when you're like a larger body, like company size element, it's one thing. But like, well, I'll never forget walking outside the wire in Eastern Afghanistan, and with that small little element, and looking back, being like, oh man, ooh, ooh, we are alone out here. Like, and it was like a 5 hour helicopter ride from Bagram. Like, we are really out here. Like,
Damn.
whoa. So,
The
but
uh
I got
the
to
don't
leave.
be a bitch feeling will do a lot for you. I've found
Mhm.
in my own personal life as well. That'll do a lot for you. Um okay, so you go back, then do you enlist, or because you
Yeah,
said you're ROTC before?
yeah, I enlisted.
Okay, and then you end up back there. I've had people talk about boot camp and stuff before, so we don't have to
Yeah,
do
boot
much of
camp.
that. Um So you end up back in Ramadi 18
Hmm.
months later. This is like, if I remember my history correctly, this is like peak
Hmm.
Iraq.
Hmm.
So completely different than Afghanistan. So we're like less mountainous, more kind of built up in the areas that you were.
Yeah.
Different type of warfare completely.
Hmm.
So going in, are you in another like kind of nervy here we go, or are you more like excited, or like where are you at? Or both, I guess. I don't know.
Best way to illustrate that would be when it was announced that we were going to Ramadi, because we relieved 3rd Battalion 8th Marines and had been reading about them uh, our entire workup, and we didn't know till, I wouldn't say the very end of the workup, but towards the end of the workup, about where we were going. And 3-8 got chewed up in Ramadi bad. They had I think it was, I don't know the exact numbers anymore, but it was around like 20 guys killed, and a whole lot of casualties. And it was a really nasty period. But we had this gunny come out and announce to the company, the weapons company, that he wasn't our company gunny, but he was a gunny that people had some feelings for. But announced that, and you could have heard a pin drop, because there was all kinds of rumors that like this battalion had been in Fallujah, the deployment before, post push. They had been in Afghanistan, the deployment before that, where I covered them. And so they had like 2 legit combat deployments in a row. And the talk was we were going to get a med float, or we were going to get some sort of skate deployment, like and everybody's kind of looking forward for this. And then we found out we were going to replace 3-8, who had been very badly chewed up. And it changed the entire tone. Like it got dark in a hurry. And there was a point not too long after that, where my platoon sergeant, I forget exactly what we were doing, but we were doing some like drills inside the barracks. I think they were casualty drills, and he was going over, different, like, hey, can you guys tie tourniquets? Like, we're all this stuff we're supposed to know inherently, but we really need to know for the environment we're going into. And a bunch of 19, 20-year-old guys just effing off. And he got so mad that he broke a metal clipboard in half with his knee, just snapped it.
Damn.
And and then we did a Chinese field day, they used to call it, where we had to take everything out of our rooms and put it out in the courtyard. Like, just got hazed, not hazed, but military instructed until we knew better. And but so that was the mentality. When we got there, it was completely different. And it was we were coming in a 3-8. You could look. I was part of the advance party onto Hurricane Point, and you could see the exhaustion in these guys' eyes. They had been through the absolute ringer, and I'll never forget our first real patrol with them. We hop in, and I thought, like, they just picked random dudes out, like, hey, you're gonna go on a familiarization patrol with 3-8. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I got picked. Go out there, sit in the the vehicle commander seat in this Humvee, and we had the actual vehicle commander was behind me. They had the turret gunner. There was one other guy from my platoon, and then the driver was a 3-8 guy. And so I'm like, got my map, trying to be all professional, like I'm all clean, all charged up, have my stupid Wiley X like goggles on, like a total boot, and look at the map and like trying to orient, like, what are we doing today, gentlemen? What are we doing? Where are we going? Like, we're gonna pop your cherry. And they said, excuse me, like, we're gonna go get in a fight because you guys need to figure out like what this place is all about. And I went, oh fuck, like, this is real, man. And we go out, we hit a house, the the locals get really upset. Local interns get really upset, and hightailed it back out of the AO back into our base, and immediately got mortared on the way back in through the gate. So they followed us the entire way, let us know that they controlled the tempo out there in the city. And on the one hand, I look over and I see the guys from 3-8 who are hugging and slap each other on the back, and some of them I can hear them saying like, "Hey, we made it! Like, this was their last patrol. Like, they were done. They were finally done." And then, like, I realized, like, I have 179 or 209 more days of this for that 7-month deployment, and it was like, this is gonna be something different. And it really started to set in. But you have those kinds of thoughts, and you got to let them go immediately because you got to focus on your job. So
Yeah. Talk to getting into the first sort of like very big firefight. Like what is that? And also, if we're going into areas that you don't want to get into, we can definitely move on. But like, what is that like in terms of you like set up? Well, I don't really know what to ask because I've never been there. But you hear some of the stories, you hear some of the like the special ops guys go on different podcasts and they have different
yeah.
sort of stories about it. But you never hear, at least I say you never. I have not heard them like a marine perspective on that on those sorts of environments before. So what is that like generally?
So I mean, I don't really like to rehash individual engagements because there's a million different versions of it. It is, but I can give you some seminal events that
Sure.
happen.
Like just generally speaking, like for somebody that's never even been in this situation before or like been close to that situation before,
Yeah.
like I don't know enough of the specific engagements to ask you about one anyways. But
Yeah. I
like
got you.
how you guys are setting up different tactics, like how fast things go
Oh,
out the window,
yeah.
like all these sorts of things, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I'll walk you through a couple different vignettes here. It's the easiest way to do it. And I'll finish with one that's kind of darkly hilarious. But so the first real time that things went like it shows like how chaotic everything is, and no matter how professional you are or prepared you think you are, when you get dropped into an environment like the city of Ramadi, which I mean, like you go to you go downtown in the Gauntlet, it's like 5, 10 story buildings, straight up, with like an avenue down the middle, very dense, impossible to see. Overall, most of the time we took contact, it was inside 50 meters, but the real threat was IEDs. and that or roadside bombs that were everywhere. Sniper fire was big, and at this point, we were bumping into an enemy that really knew how Marines operated, and they had mirrored the tactics of say 3-8 and had like tried to counter exactly what they were doing, and we didn't know any better. So the first real patrol slash engagement we went on was an absolute cluster, where it was a route clearance mission, and we were escorting engineers. But at the time, we were copying a tactic used by 3-8 and used by the British called satellite patrolling, where we would push out like you'd have the main element go down the main route, and then we would push platoons out on the periphery to try and disrupt folks ambushing them. You know, what ends up happening during that is that this is like you're like in our case, it was the first time we are driving at night with NVGs in the city, so you really didn't know what you're doing. And we ended up getting turned around, quasi lost in the city because it's like we had Blue Force trackers in our vehicles, but they didn't work. So you're using a handheld map, didn't know any of the actual reference points, and just trying to stay a couple blocks off of the main effort. And at a certain point, the engineers hit a massive IED and got ambushed, and we're like 3 blocks over and like can kind of sort of hear some of it, but not really know what's going on. Go back, and the first thing I saw was a buffalo split in half. And like those aren't my guys, so I didn't really have any kind of emotional attachment to it. Like it's like, whoa, what the heck is this? Like it's real. It's burning on the side. It turned out the engineers had a very bad day. I believe well, at least a couple of them got killed, and we just like we're trying to go back to our OP at this point. They stop the mission. They recall everybody. We stop for a second, and in an infamous moment in Marine Corps history that often gets forgotten and probably forgotten for the right reasons to protect the people involved in it. A couple guys got out to piss from their vehicle like in a different part of my platoon and got left behind. Like, yeah, it's just chaos, right? We're brand new to the AO. But nobody went very far, right? It was just like it was like everything. Everybody's all amped up or confused, like big boom. There's gunfire, like all kinds of stuff. And no matter how prepared anybody was or how much combat experience they had had in previous deployments, this was new. This was totally different. They'd have to circle back, pick these guys up, and fall back in the formation before the platoon sergeant or platoon commander were any wiser to it. But that was basically, I mean, that's like week one right there. The actual like I don't know sensation of getting hit by an IED is a little weird. I remember end of the second week there, my vehicle got blown up, and I ended up finding the video of it on one of these websites, like Live Leak or something back in like 2007, 2008, where a video of it, and it looked a lot worse on the video than it did actually experiencing it. But like once again, we're responding to IEDs being put out, another chaotic day of just random stuff happening. And we were coming back to Hurricane Point for like the second or third time, and my vehicle was last in the movement, and like we thought we were done for the day. And like driving along, all of a sudden like everything slows down. There's this bright white flash, like, and kind of got stunned for a second. And then I remember like looking over, like kind of like down into the center console of the vehicle, and like just watched all the sand just slowly levitate up, and went, oh no, this is like we're getting blown up. And then just fast forwarded, and there was a pop can of Cheetos in the middle that just went everywhere. Didn't take the vehicle totally out, blew our antennas off, flattened the tires, messed everything up pretty good. I think our machine gunner got a bit of a concussion out of it. But we were okay, and we went back, and it's just like, whew, that was weird. But some of the stuff that's like super surreal about that environment is when you're in a city like that and you have everything built up, how compartmentalized everything can become. There was a major operation we did later in the deployment, where it turned into a at least a company side kind of running firefight, where we had line companies over in one spot. They were trying to clear buildings and move them. We were screening for them as the weapons company element, and literally had like my platoon commander a passing out like a teddy bear to a kid like on one block, and then the next block down, two of our vehicles and the people inside them are going cyclic, like long axis down a major thoroughfare, while the insurgents were shooting east to west. We're shooting south to north or north to south, and the insurgents shooting east to west down another long axis at a bunch of line company guys as they're trying to cross the street. But like my platoon commander, like just heard that his guys were in contact over here, is talking to some friendly people while we get lit up over here. And then the insurgents are lighting guys up over here. And you don't really get to piece all of this back together until you get back to base. And we got back, and a good friend of mine had been shot through the pack, had like his ACOG shot off his rifle. The battalion commander is coming down and lecturing my platoon for shooting too much, because we dumped a couple thousand rounds within a few minutes, and they saw it all on ISR at the time. So then that leads to like an ammo count. Like, where is all this ammo coming from? Like, we weren't supposed to have that much, I guess, with us. And it's
Wait.
yeah.
Okay. Because then my next question was going to be how you mentioned that the insurgency had kind of learned the tactics of 3/8 and were adapting to that. So
Yeah.
my follow-up to this was going to be, okay, so how are you guys adapting to counter the counter?
Okay.
But then also to then, dude, you're shooting too much. I don't know. Maybe you're in a war zone.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
is that going to be another long rabbit hole that we don't need to get into, and it's exactly how it sounds?
No, no. So let me hit on it. I left that a key part in there. Like this, some of the stuff I tend to gloss over.
No, you're good.
But so how did we adapt? So it was very clear, like to for the sake of time here. It was very clear that the satellite patrolling method was stupid. It was not working, and there was a feeling among me and my peers that it was a matter of time. People kept getting their vehicles blown up. I remember watching the entire engine block disappear off the truck in front of mine at night, on one of these patrols, and all kinds of near misses. And it was just considered a matter of time before these guys got lucky with us, because it didn't make any sense to be off on the side when you have IED clearing vehicles, clearing like lanes, basically. Like, why would you be out here where it's not protected? So there were complaints, and recommendations about how we should operate better, but we were just continuing the methodology until we figured it out. And then there was an absolutely catastrophic evening, where one of my really close friends was killed, along with two other Marines. And then additional two Marines were burnt very severely, including the platoon commander for that platoon, because they were satellite patrolling. And what ended up happening was they were on the outside, and we had IR like side lights on the top of the vehicles. But if you lined up at a 90-degree offset, you could see a bright red dot. And people were kind of looking like, this is not a good idea. But hey, it was SOP. We had to have it. And my buddy Cliff was driving the gun truck and parked right dead over top of like a triple stack 155 with an acetylene tank on top. And it went off and trapped him and another guy inside the vehicle. The initial blast apparently didn't kill him, and took a couple limbs off the machine gunner, Nathan Elrod, who died on the way to the hospital. And then the vehicle commander was badly burned, and Lieutenant Moran, who was the platoon commander, was very badly burned in that incident. But and the thing about Lieutenant Moran was that he was an absolutely incredible officer. He was the kind of guy back in the barracks who, if things were stupid on a Friday night, we were being held past time, would come out and hang out in the barracks with the Marines. He wouldn't stay in the company office. And he'd come out and be like, this is bullshit. Like, he was a really good dude. Everybody wanted to be in his platoon. And he was deeply respected in the battalion. So when he got hit, there was a an emphasis on changing the way we operated, and immediately the SOP became you did not go down roads that had not been cleared in 24 hours, and we made the insurgents come to us. So you knew we were going to be. We weren't going to go farming, hunting out for you. You knew we were going to be. So, kind of like Wild West style, come meet us on the X at whatever time. And that was actually the first patrol, if you want to call it, that was done after Cliff and Nicholas Mnuchin and Nathan L. Robb were killed. And my platoon got to do it, which was fantastic, where we hooked in with the psychological operations guys from the Army, and we rolled out to checkpoint 295, which is right in front of where the Gov Center was, or it probably still is in Ramadi, and just set up, just sat out there, and got the PSYOPs guys on their little radios, and they called the insurgents a bunch of names and talked about their moms and did all kinds of stuff until these guys came out and wanted to play. And then we got into a nice little firefight with them, and kind of got it out of our system, if you will. And some near misses in that firefight. No, on our side got hit. Looked like quite a few insurgents got theirs in the process. And the thing that stood out to me about that was like, it's you got all this bravado that people like to talk about when they talk about gunfights and everything. It's just like how ultimately for me unsatisfying that was. Like it was like my friends are dead and we got out here and we just mixed it up. Yeah, cool. Like that feels kind of good to go out there and I guess get some retribution. But at the end of it, like we didn't accomplish a whole lot because we went back and refit and then had to go out and do it again the next day. But that being said, it did change how we operated. And then from there on out, Lieutenant Colonel, I think he got out as a major general. Fantastic guy. I loved his Marines. He would approach you all the time. He approached me all the time and talked to me like a human being, which is fantastic. Um, but like he wanted to make sure we were okay, and like we went point to point, and then we gradually extended this like line of OPs and Iraqi police stations with Marines embedded as like little logistical drop points, right? So we went out after that thing in 295. We went out and checked out recon like a school that the insurgents were using, and then determined that it was a key piece of terrain because they shot at us while we were trying to recon it. And we brought a bunch of tanks in to take care of them. But they were like, hey, this is a key piece of terrain. So it became a big operation to put a major company size OP there. And then we put another OP around the next bend that was like platoon size and had a string of these. So we would go between them all the time. And then they would launch foot patrols out in between the two to kind of clear and draw fire. But at the same time, if the guys on foot ever got in trouble, the weapons company with Army tanks was there in a heartbeat to back them up. So it was kind of they were used as bait. We were used as bait, but it was the nature of things, I guess.
Yeah. Damn, that's wild. You mentioned how unsatisfying it was. Is that where your why are we here questions start to pop up, or is that later?
I had a skewed perspective of it going into it. Like my dad was vehemently against the Iraq war from the beginning. I knew like just as like the culture in my family that like once again, don't be a bitch, right? We fought in every American war going back to the French and Indian. Someone in my family has done it. So when it's your turn to go, you go. And I turned down an intelligence contract in the Marine Corps to go infantry, and the bonus that went along with it. In retrospect, probably pretty dumb, but that 50,000 bonus could have done something. But I had to be a grunt, otherwise I couldn't come to my Thanksgiving table. That's just the way it was. So the why are we here part of it, I was not bullish on it succeeding, like our methodology succeeding while we were there. I would say the biggest example of like that going to absolute zero, or the biggest contributor to it, was a little bit later in the deployment when they brought in the Iraqi army, the Shia Iraqi army into Sunni Ramadi, Iraq, and
Yeah, that's a
there
great
was
idea.
oh,
For people that don't know the difference between Sunni and Just go look it up. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah. Diametrically opposed in a lot of ways. And they got in a series of intramural firefights, like a series of them. And one in particular that stood out was apparently a goat had crossed the street. And it was a Sunni goat that went to a Shia OP, and the two sides got into a very vicious firefight. I don't think anybody was hit, but they shot at each other like at the cyclic rate for like an hour. And our battalion wanted us to insert ourselves to break it up. We end up not doing it, and we just drove around in circles listening to a firefight, being like, "What the frick is going on here?" And it was pretty clear at that point. This ain't gonna work, right? It's just not gonna work.
Yeah. Did you, to kind of wrap
Mhm.
all the ideas that we've talked about today, you've been in lots of positions where you've been able to identify something that isn't going to work or does not have maybe the winning sort of formula, right? We talked about RFK's campaign. We've talked
Mhm.
about things going legislation on the Senate floor and how that is what it is. We've talked about um, Ramadi. What is it about you that not to say that you can fix all these things, but the ideas to say like, hey, maybe we don't try that or we try something else like from a leadership perspective and from your perspective in terms of identifying these kind of through lines because that's something that like that's a very like if somebody's in leadership that somebody that has the ability to do that is somebody that I would want around. So
Mhm.
like where in terms of identifying those things the through lines where do you think that comes from, and then secondly as a leader where are you at with like, how would you go about if you had yourself as like an advisor? Like, how would you go about doing that? Because I think that's something that a lot of leaders struggle with,
Mhm.
um, or just people generally. Because like I've been in the situation that you called out myself many times. Like, hey, remember when I told you that that wasn't going to work because X, Y, and Z, and then you didn't listen, and I look, it
Yeah.
didn't work, right? And some of the times you
Right.
hate to be vindicated because it fails, right? Because
Yeah.
that happens. But as a leader, how would you like deal with, for lack of a better term, somebody like yourself? Because it's not easy to just go ahead and implement something like that.
Yeah.
Like, even if you are right, it's not easy to just be like, yep, you know what? Jim said, and now we're all doing it this way. Like, it doesn't work that way. But so, in terms of identifying those things, and then also from the leadership perspective, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Wow. Let me start with the leadership side. Oh, dog. Yeah, sorry, my dog's barking. Um,
I
but
can't hear. You're good.
okay, good. Yeah, yeah. So when it comes to like what you don't want to be is a contrarian for being a contrarian, the sake of being a contrarian. You don't want to be the no guy. You don't want to be the negative guy. You want to be the guy with positive ideas. And so it's very easy in any leadership position or any position generally. It's actually a lot easier when you're not a leader to pick something apart and be like, this sucks. It's not going to work. I mean, it's like there's a Marine Corps foil Lance corporals who think PT is crap. But hey, you do get stronger, right? But you know, you need to have a solidly well thought out alternative, and you have to also accept the fact that it's probably not going to be implemented because it's not about you. If you're not in charge, it's not about you. And so, with that in mind, the ability to communicate whatever your vision is or your adjustments um, has to be done with tact. Like you have to show respect and deference to the person who's in charge, even if you can't stand them. Like if you think they're stupid, if you think this is corrupt, whatever it is, and you got to present a very cohesive argument, but it's not an argument, like a demonstration of how you can move the needle, right? That'd be like the fundamental approach that I would suggest. In the political environment, it's a little more difficult because these people are adherent to whatever they want for any kind of number of reasons. Um, but that gets back to like one of the reasons I left the Kennedy campaign, which is I knew I wasn't going to get my way. And it wasn't about me; it's about the like my peers. Like, could I get up and look my peers in the eyes and be like, yeah, I'm doing that, and I'm selling out, right? But So you have to accept that, and you got to have your own convictions, and you got to draw the lines around your own convictions as to when you'll step away and when you can positively implement things. Um, Now, in terms of today's environment, this is tricky. It's very easy to sit here and point out all of the things that are going wrong, and to stay on it. It's a little more difficult to have solutions for it, and it's even harder to communicate that vision to an audience that will like pick it up and implement it. Like you gotta like, I guess, kind of hope that someone listens, but understand that no one really is going to. I may be sounding a little bit redundant here, um, but if I was going to fix the things that were going on right now, with like I'll take the Iran war as the thing that's at the top. It's probably the loudest screaming piece of news out there. It's that like and I try to do this, but if I was given the opportunity to do it on the inside, it would be to, you don't want to label the entire United States as the bad guys. We're not the bad guys. The individual Americans are not the bad guys. What we're doing is extremely counterproductive, and it's getting a lot of people killed, and it's hurting U.S. credibility. The alternate vision to that is like, it sounds simple, but it's not. It's a return to the force structure and intent of our foreign policy that was there probably 20 or 30 years ago. It's I look at the state of the Marine Corps right now, which is designed specifically to counter China in a war. And fundamentally, if you're a military guy, like, you understand that that's a horrible idea because there's no guarantee you're going to fight the Chinese. Like, what if the Marine Corps has to go fight in, environment X in country Y, and it no longer has the capabilities to do it? You need a generalist force. I would go back to expeditionary, the expeditionary model of the Marine Corps, where you got a scalable war in a box that can go into an area. That also keeps you out of trouble, quite frankly, because you're not inflaming tensions. And then constitutionally, like, I'm just waiting for people to step up and do this, where like, you need to have co-equal branches of government, and you need people who will be in leadership positions in the legislature who will fight for that, because they're getting walked over right now. Like, the whole latest iteration of like it, love it, hate it. The latest iteration of strikes in Iran, which is turning into just open war, violates every fundamental tenet of our constitutional structure. Like, there's no authorization for it. But you could point that, you can say all day, like, oh, this is an illegal war, these guys are war criminals, and impeach them. It's like, okay, great. Like, but what's the solution to that? Like, you got to be, if you're gonna make change, you got to have, like, bottom line, you got to have solutions, you got to have an alternative, and it's got to be in the affirmative, because nobody responds to negativity. It's like, we'll put this in like household terms. You're married, like, you're cooking a delicious steak. You love steak. Your wife doesn't want steak, and she comes in and is like, "Oh, I hate cows. Like, cows are the most disgusting creatures on earth. What a terrible, terrible thing. Oh my, I can't believe this is in my kitchen." Your reaction is going to be probably like, go jump in the freaking pool, man. Like, just go. Like, conversely, you come in and say, how about a delicious, like, how about I order you some delicious Thai food? Like, you take a break tonight. Um, you know, it's in the affirmative. Like, oh, cool, Thai food. So probably not, the greatest way to illustrate that point, but
No, it
like,
worked.
yeah, okay, good, okay, yeah, so
It worked.
cool, yeah,
No,
but
that
it's
makes sense. I Yeah, I don't disagree. And I mean, it is hard to even to think of solutions sometimes, because you just know, like me and you sitting here, we could talk about all the things that are going
yeah.
wrong and whatever, and we know that nothing is gonna, like, it doesn't matter what you and I say. So it is a bit difficult sometimes.
I
Well, I
didn't.
guess no, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, as I was gonna say, like I mean, something more concrete, right? Like, I always forget to talk about this, but like, I worked in business for a while,
Hmm.
pretty long while. And one of the things I was always keyed in on was refining processes. I hate systems. Like, systems exist for a reason, but when you become reliant on a system, it means you're deflecting responsibility. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I followed the flow chart, so I'm not responsible for this being screwed up. It's like, well, actually, you are, but
Fix
more
the flow
importantly,
chart, man.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's and those kinds of things, they give you an opportunity to build rapport with people who are in charge, right? So it's like, hey, we're doing A through Z, really A, F, and G matter. How do we get there? And like, here's an example of refining that to a point that worked. And it saved you X, Y, and Z. Like, give them something to work with.
Yeah. No, 100%. In individual lives, yeah, exactly. If somebody's coming to you with solutions, like that person is usually invaluable to whatever it is that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Um, damn, time's flown.
Hey.
Um, let's go with optimistic or pessimistic for the future, both generally US, we'll say US wise.
Man. Oh man. Long term optimistic, short term very pessimistic. And we have a very resilient country that has a very unique system that always tends to be self correcting, but we have spent so much time over the past 30 or 40 years just debasing that system, and getting away from the things that make us successful. So I'm very pessimistic, and a lot of that has to do with how badly we've alienated our basically our core allies, right? Like I look at Europe, and there's a big, big, big push to get out of NATO. I have my own opinions about the I guess the rationale for it at this point, the need for it, et cetera, et cetera. But the most important part of it is it's a cultural underpinning that keeps us tied to the systems of government from which we were born. And I mean, just look at the way the World Cup was such a hit here in the U.S. People coming over here loving it. I mean, there's so much overlap culturally, and we need that right now. We need that in a bad way. We've picked off a we've picked it's not picked off. We've taken a huge bite out of something I don't think we necessarily can chew all the way with Iran and BRICS, and even the president's statements last week about China, where we're going to need people in our corner. We're going to need trade partners. We're going to need, and not, it's not a battlefield thing. It is, we need people to walk through the fire with us, of what's coming up, because the world is rebalancing,
Yeah.
and we're not at the top anymore. And we need people who are gonna, be in our corner one way or the other. And at least in the short term, we've done a great job of pissing all that away. And I think that corrects itself, but there's going to be some pain in the intermediate term. Just look at the way the oil markets are going. Fertilizer come out of the Middle East is at a full stop. Ukraine and Russia are on fire. And all of that's going to impact our quality of life here, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, to your point about Europe, like when so I'm very tuned in, I'm a soccer player, soccer coach, very tuned into like kind of European sort of, at least within the sports world,
Mhm.
they really hate Trump, like more than I realized. Like more like I knew they did, but then when the red card got overturned, like the European press is like calling for corruption charges against Infantino and like all sorts. And I was like, you guys just overturned a red card for your own tournament last year or 2 years ago. And I
Mhm.
just like, and I knew it, but like didn't, that was very eye-opening to be like, oh no, 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 this is like for real. Um, but yeah, to your point on quality of life, yeah, we're like I think I generally agree with that sentiment. Pessimistic, a bit near term, long term. I think more optimistic. But um, tell the people where they can find your show and all the stuff that you got going on.
Yeah, you can find me over at the Jim Webb Podcast. That's on YouTube. There's a Jim Webb Podcast handle on X, which really isn't used all that much. So come find me if you want to hear from me at James Webb _16. That's on X, or the Jim Webb Podcast on YouTube, or anywhere you can find podcasts generally. So yeah, also like I mean, they should never reverse that red card on Balogun, just as a matter of like it wasn't going to matter. I see that's an entire like rabbit hole. Like I think FIFA was corrupt in that because they wanted to keep the home team in. I mean, like no offense to Belgium, but there's not 400 million people there who are going to watch. So,
No, definitely. I think the red card was a very soft red card.
oh yeah,
There's a way to overturn it, which is not how they did it, where nobody's pissed off. But
Yeah.
it was how they did it that was not good. Plenty of red cards have been overturned before, but the way they did it, like they suspended the suspension.
Yeah.
Just rescind the red card and say that the ref got it wrong, but they don't want to throw the ref under the bus either. So here we are. Yeah, dude, anyways. Any last thoughts before we get you out of here?
No, man, truly appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely.
For those listening, go check the links out in the description for Jim's show and all of his social links as usual. Go check the merch out down below as well. And we thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you want to watch another episode like this one, click there. If you want to subscribe, click there.